Hello, everyone. This is Reyes Ramirez here, the program's outreach coordinator for Fresh Arts. If you haven't been here before, if you haven't tuned in, this is a conversation series we're having for June, and this is the last of them. If you don't know who Fresh Arts is, we are a arts nonprofit organization based primarily out of Houston, Texas. And we provide resources to artists, professional development, knowledge sharing, and other key resources that we think are very valuable to practicing artists. And though, again, like I said, we're based primarily out of Houston, Texas, it is through our online and digital resources, such as the one you're watching now, that we think, is accessible to anyone, hopefully outside of Houston, and hopefully will be useful to them. And so if you have been here before, thank you for tuning in again. And as you know, we're always going to have a great conversation. And so if you've missed any workshops, if you've missed any discussions, we have an archive that you're more than welcome to peruse and watch. And so you just go to our website and go to our artist resource library. And that will be posted in the comments or right there. Thank you, Angela. And so again, if you missed anything, feel free to peruse our archives and get caught up. Another thing to note is that during this conversation, feel free to post any questions you have for our guests or in general in regards to the context of the discussion. So you'll post them in the comments below, and we'll screen them and we'll get them asked right to our guests. Again, always feel free to post just where you're tuning in from, just to let us know how far we're reaching. And also, we just want to give y'all shout outs. So please post in the comments whatever you feel, whatever you think is relevant to our conversation. And we'll address it. If it's a question, we'll ask that to our guests. And so today we have a really, really great conversation going that's going to happen. And so first we have from Writers in the Schools, Patricia Garcia Soto, who is the Director of Youth Programs and Events. I'm going to read the WIT's bio real quick, just so y'all have a context. So Writers in the Schools, since 1983, Writers in the Schools, also known as WITS, has enlivened K-12 classrooms throughout Houston and inspired 500,000 children to engage in the creative process. Founded through the University of Houston Creative Writing Program, WIT sends professional novelists and poets into schools for long-term residencies that strengthen literacy skills for students and cultivate creative pedagogy for teachers. Today, WIT is one of the largest literary arts organizations in Texas and leads an international alliance of 38 sister programs. And kind of the reason why we thought it was really great to have WITs here is that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the work of Writers in the Schools shifted from in-school creative writing residencies and public-facing programs to new and innovative online opportunities. Through this transition, WITS has continued to provide resources for teachers, families, and students through the completion of residencies using synchronous and asynchronous learning experiences, as well as the creation of new online programming. This spring, WITS launched new digital programs such as Quick Wits, WITS U, right here, and also shifted its creative writing camp to an entirely online creative experience. And that's something we'll definitely be delving into, the particulars of how such programs happen. So, hi, Patricia.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Reyes.
Of course. And up next, we have Shannon Kreider, who is the education director for the Houston Center for Photography. And let me read that bio real quick. So the Houston Center for Photography, starting in 1981 as a small visual artists organization, HCP has grown to become an exemplary fine art organization. Their gallery, free to the public, features some of the finest works of contemporary photography. HCP also offers over 300 photography classes and workshops year-round. Varying in competency levels, these classes are all taught by esteemed photographers and lecturers, including some of the masters of the medium. While HCP galleries are temporarily closed for the safety of their staff and public, they are pleased to offer their community new ways to experience Houston Center for Photography's programs, learn something new in their online classes, and discover new virtual programming on spot, including virtual exhibition tours, artist lectures, and discussions as part of their Words and Pictures lecture series and photography activities you can remotely enjoy. So thank you, Shannon, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So I guess let me start off by asking, just kind of give even more context and maybe more for what's going on, what has happened. Patricia, can you talk about a little bit of what WITS usually did before the COVID-19 crisis? Just so everyone, in case they don't know what WITS is, what was the usual practice of how WITS carried out its education programs?
Sure. So, I mean, as our name suggests, Writers in the Schools, the work that we do is predominantly happening in K through 12 schools in Houston. We also work at various different community locations and sites, hospitals, drop-in shelters, libraries, all sorts of things. But a lot of our work is direct in-person work. We provide short and long-term writing residencies, creative writing residencies within schools for classrooms for young people around the city. We also work directly with teachers and provide professional development. And a lot of the work of the youth program and my role is doing public-facing events. So we run Houston's largest youth poetry slam series, which is called the Space City Slam Series every spring, and various other public-facing readings and things that are celebrating young writers around the city. So a lot of the work that we were doing was really in-person, community-oriented, working directly with those students. So it definitely was a really big shift for us to make the move to kind of an entirely digital space.
Yeah, I will say I've worked with Writers in the School before, and just so in case if y'all haven't heard of WITS or haven't worked with WITS, it's literally, like you're assigned to school and you go to that school and you kind of become embedded in that community and you teach the youth there. You could teach a classroom. It's really in person, so it'll be interesting to kind of, again, cover how y'all have adjusted. So thank you. Shannon, can you also give an overview of what HCP usually did before all this?
So Houston Center for Photography is a nonprofit gallery. We're an educational space and a publisher. And so, usually we have the gallery open. You're able to see our exhibitions. We also have our learning center where we teach adult classes, teen classes, and during the summer camp. We also have a digital lab that is available for members to use and printers for members to use. So those are not available right now. And then we have a magazine that we produce, and we went digital in the last year, so we've been able to pivot a lot of our programming through our Spot magazine online. And then the last part, or like arm of HCP, is our access and community programs. And so like WITS, we go into the schools and to community partners like hospitals and libraries to provide STEAM education and photography education. And so we're pivoting because we're not doing any of those programs in person right now.
Right, and so let's get to that. So with everything happening, I think kind of the particular conversation we can have is really shifting those pedagogical models. I mean, I know as a teacher myself, I have these lesson plans that are perhaps planned out, that I've practiced, that I've worked on, that I've perfected through like teaching and experience. But now, and not to say they're gone out of the window, but they, in a lot of ways, fundamentally shift in many ways. And so we're going to kind of get into that. So Patricia, can you talk about how WITS is adjusting in regards to their usual practices, right? So what are they doing differently now? And reading that bio, we get that sense of like shifting online, and you have those different programs that are going on. Could you kind of go into them and like what they are exactly and what they do?
For sure. So I think, like you said, Reyes, a lot of our work was really going into physical classrooms and having our teaching artists, who we call our WITS writers, go in and work with these groups of students. And so the first thing we kind of had to do, I think, in this shift was really think about how we were going to honor the residencies that still needed to be completed. So when everything shut down, we were still in the spring, sort of towards the end of the school year, where our writers are usually going in and wrapping up, doing lots of celebrations with students, kind of finalizing writing portfolios, that kind of thing. And so we had to navigate that. And one thing that we were finding was that there, was just a lot of really tremendous pressure on teachers in schools. And they had to make this huge jump and transition, sometimes without a whole lot of support and within a global pandemic. And so we were finding that we wanted to definitely be respectful of those teachers and figure out what they really needed at this time, and maybe going full force into like wanting to complete this residency wasn't the best thing. So I think one thing that a lot of our writers did was they worked with their individual teachers, and we stayed in communication with them and kind of figured out whether or not something like a synchronous like live session with the students was possible and feasible, or whether or not the writers needed to create some content that the teachers could kind of use on their own time and embedded within the work that they were doing online with their students. And so we shifted that model a lot. And so we were seeing definitely a combination of both, but certain schools, had a lot more going on. And so some of our writers were creating sort of pre-recorded lessons, mentor texts, sending basically resources to the teachers that they could use to continue that writing time for the young people, but with a little bit of a lower risk, just in that there was so much pressure placed on them to make that transition for their students. So that was kind of the first thing. And then we were definitely really thinking about, well, now that young people are at home, it's, the end of the school year, maybe they're not, their school day is not totally full as it used to be, with in-person classrooms and things like that. So what could we offer to have sort of a creative space where young people could, build community and have their voices be heard and do something that didn't feel so school-based and that was really low risk for them, and that it wasn't being graded. It's just really a fun opportunity. And so that's where the Wits U program came. And so that is a free online workshop program. And so we were doing 2 workshops a week, starting in the spring, 1 workshop for middle school students and then 1 for high school students. And so one of our Wits writers would come in and we'd do sort of a live Zoom session where they would do some generative writing, some sharing, and just talking to the young people about kind of what they were experiencing. And it was really, in a lot of ways, nice because we do free community workshops at different locations around the city, but oftentimes there are barriers to students attending those, whether that's transportation, the location of that, the timing. So I think we got to see some more young people that normally wouldn't have been able to come to some of our in-person work. So that was really nice to see. And then, a lot of this also came out of the necessity of us supporting our Wits writers. And so we have a large roster of Wits writers, almost 100 people who we work with, who are going into the schools on a regular basis. And we wanted to make sure that they weren't going to lose out on pay, on, the compensation for the work that they were doing at the end of the school year, if there were schools that weren't able to, have us back virtually. And so with Wits U and then with the other program, Quick Wits, which is an online bank of pre-recorded writing lessons that are anywhere between like 10 to 15, 20 minutes long, that parents and teachers can use with their young students, or self-motivated students can kind of do them on their own and that sort of thing. Those were opportunities for us to also pay the artists that we work with. And those were new things. We wanted to make sure that we were offering something more, so that our writers were continuing to have work, through the pandemic. And so those were 2 of the kind of big programs that we started, aside from shifting all of our residencies online. And then right here, our marketing team sort of put that together with Outspoken Bean, who is, my colleague and also like a pretty prominent poet in the community. And so he's doing online Instagram interviews with like some of our writers from the community, who are doing a lot of community work, doing great work in the arts world, and also working with our students. And so just hearing from them on kind of like a human to human basis, how they're experiencing the pandemic, their creative practice. And I think it's just it's a fun way for us to kind of be in conversation with the folks in our community and highlight local writers and, artists that we work with on a regular basis. So that was kind of, a lot of the big stuff. And then of course we shifted our creative writing camp. So every summer we have a very large creative writing camp program that we do in partnership with Rice University. Thousands of kids are coming through and doing these 1 week or 2 week long camp experiences. And so we really had to navigate, how do we switch that over in a way that is feasible, that is not too much burden on the shoulders of the instructors, is engaging for young people, and also had to navigate all the logistics of switching families over from in-person to online. All the kids get t-shirts. There's all these little pieces of that we kind of had to manage. So it was a lot. It was communicating with like over 800 parents, talking through options, and then really working with the Wits writers who were going to teach the courses, who, had to build out the content. And so they're really, the ones who made the magic this summer. We're in our second session of camp programs, and we're starting a third in July. So we'll have had 3 kind of full camp sessions. So that was a really big overhaul. First time we've ever done anything like that. And so a huge shout out to our partners at Rice for supporting us in that, and also our WITS writers who created something out of nothing.
Yeah, no, we can get into that later, like how that actually happens. But I want to ask that same question to Shannon. Shannon, what is HCP doing now to kind of shift and adjust to the COVID-19 crisis?
So we've had to shift, everything we do basically. So all of the different arms, starting with our access and community education programs. Similarly, we've been creating videos for some of our partners. Natalie Rogers, our community education manager, has very quickly become a great video maker. We're learning new skills in this time, but she's created videos. We also had a teen program that was a semester-long program that got disrupted. And so we continued the second half of it through an online portal, Zoom. And then usually they would have an in-person exhibition. And so we did an online exhibition and reception. But the cool thing about it is Natalie worked with the students to create videos between, we had 2-person videos with each a set of students, and they interviewed each other about their work. And not only did these teens just make really thoughtful and, wonderful work, but I think it's special to capture how much they respect each other in the video process and then interviewing. So, it's a nice keepsake for them to kind of keep in their portfolio moving on. So kind of from each program, we've had to have a bespoke adjustment. Similarly to WITS, we have a camp in the summer that runs their 1-week camps. And we are offering it with a check-in every day with students, but we don't want them to, spend 5 hours in front of a computer. So we've created videos and made supply packets so that the students can work on projects on their own at home and then check in with their instructor every day. And so we still have more weeks to come if anybody wants to join that. For our exhibitions, we had a great exhibition open 1 week before we closed, Tools of the Revolution, fashion, make sure I get the name exactly right, Tools of the Revolution, Fashion, Photography, and Activism. And it is just a beautiful exhibition, and it only got 1 week open. So we created an interactive video to see the exhibition, and that lives on our Spot magazine online. We've also had our public words and pictures lectures. Some of them are videos, and then some, we had a lecture with Sasha Wolf and Malcolm Daniel, and that was on Zoom, and we had almost 200 people attend that lecture. And so the kind of exciting thing, as you were hinting at, Reyes, for your programs, is that, we're able to engage people from all over the country now, or people in the Houston area, but, it's a long drive from, wherever they are in the metro. And so, there's some exciting things about that with our programs. And then the last leg of our programs is our Learning Center classes, and these are our adult and teen classes. And about, we closed mid-March, and by the end of March, we were able to pivot to providing our classes online. And, some of them were continuing classes that we always provide, and our instructors have been incredibly nimble in being able to adjust and make the adjustments to make them work online. But also our instructors have created totally new classes to meet this moment. We're trying to have, play around with the timing of classes. Some of them are shorter, so they can be a little bit more cost effective. We're also doing classes that kind of speak to people's experience right now. So one of our most popular new classes is our photographer sketchbook creating a daily practice. And so for writers, artists, photographers, helping them process everything that is going on in the world and creating a daily practice. So that was a new class that was created once we went online. We have a class called Close to Home, and it is a conceptual class about making work in response to the times we're in. So our instructors have been, they've been, my rock, because they really have been not only willing to make the adjustments, but I think even excited by tackling these challenges. And we are seeing students, we're continuing with some of our core students, but we have seen students from across the country, and we do a few free classes as well, and we've seen people from the UK and even in Australia. So that's exciting to be able to expand our reach in this time.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is, so we've gotten that kind of broad view and very, very creative in terms of like how it's being, essentially your programs are now kind of like having to be creatively readjusted. So let me ask then kind of more into the nitty gritty of like, in terms of what are the things that, that you prioritize, right? Because there's some things that like, again, like as a teacher myself, I may have a teaching style that this is my style. I do this, I do that, and now it can be potentially gone. So I have to recreate. But in regards to kind of curating those or like leading to those or choosing them, I suppose my next question and we can start off with Patricia, what is WITS prioritizing with that in regards to like how those pedagogical models still happen, right? Whether you keep to kind of the model you've always been using, but now it's like there's more of like an adjustment in regards to how you keep that model alive in that context. And so can you kind of talk about what WITS is prioritized or what it wants most to shine through with these digital readjustments?
Sure. So, I think what's been really important is to think about the fact that we are in a global crisis. And so just recognizing that there's a lot of grace that we need to extend to everyone that we work with, including the students, the teachers, the instructors from our end, and then even our staff. And so, I think for us with the online programs, particularly with things like WITS U that are interactive workshops and then our creative writing camp, the priority was definitely the engagement for the students. Understanding, and I think Shannon, you mentioned this, understanding that we don't want students to be on a live Zoom call for like 4 hours. That's just, it's too much. We're hearing a lot about screen fatigue, about students having a lot of trouble focusing, and how it's just a difficult thing to move all of that into that digital space. So I think when we were working with our writers for the WITS U program, it was really great to hear them offer some really amazing content and ways to engage. And so we kind of gave them the freedom to use the space how they wanted, but also really, I think, valued the collaborative effort of like getting advice from the previous instructors and passing that along to the next instructor so we could find some best practices. It was our first experience doing Zoom workshops. And so there was a lot of like, uphill climbing of figuring out what's the best way to do this and how can we, one, ensure the safety of the students. And so within those programs, we had like a course monitor or WITS admin staff who was there to be sort of the digital support for the writing instructor so that they didn't have to necessarily worry about technical glitches or screen sharing or issues like that, we could do that part so they could really focus on engaging with the young people and doing the sort of pedagogical teaching part. So that was definitely different because, in our normal work in schools, it's the WITS writer and the classroom teacher, but we're, as an admin staff, we're not necessarily there as an additional support. We are in the background, but not present in the classroom all the time. So I think that was different. We had to look at, what do we need to support the instructors here so that they could support the students and serve them in the best way possible. With the online stuff, comes a lot more bits and pieces that you have to think of in terms of student safety, accessibility, with Zoom, and doing public workshops. How can we make sure that the students are safe in that space? and the instructors as well. And so there was a lot that went into that. And then I think with the teaching models themselves, we did a lot of communicating with the writers ahead of time to talk them through kind of what it looks like, what we've been seeing, any support that they needed. There was a lot of go practice on Zoom for this period of time. We'll be in that room with you. We'll help you before the session. So a lot of just learning. And then with the creative writing camps, our program team did a lot of work to think about what a model for a camp day could look like, because we actually kept the hours and the dates and everything exactly the same. So, our 2-week-long camps are usually half-day camps. And so we kept it as a full half day, but within that half day, sort of split up the time in this blended learning model that had a lot of the synchronous, but also asynchronous. So, there were times during the day where classes of students would meet together with their WITS writers, do community building, do activities, but there were also a lot of times where they could step away from their screen and maybe continue a writing prompt, or they could watch kind of a short recorded thing and respond to that in a more self-directed way. And that differed from grade level to grade level. We did camps, we have camps from K through 12. So it's the models are different for each and every group of students. So thinking about, what do you do for a kindergarten creative writing class that is so dependent on, in-person, very engaging sort of centers and dictation, and how do you do that in an online model? So, our program team and our partners over at Rice really worked on how to blend that in a way that ensured that the students didn't have to feel like they were kind of stuck to the screen for the whole time. So that was definitely a lot of work and a lot of experimentation and shifting in the moment. And, it was nice. Our initial summer camp was kind of a pilot version of it. So it was a little bit smaller. So it was nice for us to have the room and kind of space to work on that model and make it even better for the next 2 sessions.
Absolutely. No, I hear you on the, K through 12. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin to imagine a kindergartner in regards to engaging that online. So that's amazing. Kudos. Shannon, same question. What, in regards to shifting, particularly the educational aspect that HCP puts on, what was the priority for HCP to kind of make sure that jump was smooth, or whether it was completely different? What did y'all prioritize in that jump?
Well, one of our instructors did a lot of the research for us to help us figure out, from an instructor's perspective, how to make it user friendly, and then we use that to train our instructors. But it's been a lot of trial and error. I would say the one kind of grace we're given right now is I think everybody is figuring out this new landscape, and so it's a good time to make this transition and to try out things. And I think our audience is pretty forgiving if there's some small bumps, because we're all learning something new right now, and I'm certainly thankful for that grace. And like I said, our instructors are just so motivated that, and many of them are teaching at the university level as well, so they're getting practice also in other channels. And like I said, we are trying to be nimble with what kind of classes we're creating, and so I'm hungry for phone conversations with them because I'm working from home and I miss people. But, we have regular phone calls and we talk about, what is working, what do they want to do, and we try to find a way to make it work. Also, just because there's so many logistical concerns with going online, and our students can't check in at the front desk and let us know if something's not working. There's a lot of hand-holding from me. I think our students hear from me a lot more than they normally would with check-ins and online surveys. And so we're trying to, as soon as we get that feedback, to make adjustments, whether it is to the content of the class, the length of the class, or how we're implementing the online elements.
Absolutely. And kind of going on to the conversation of those adjustments, starting with you, Patricia, what has been kind of the most experimental aspect that you're doing here of transitioning, what the usual to the new, and what has been kind of the most experimental? One thing that I like is kind of the Instagram live stuff that y'all do. I think those are really fun to tune into. But what has been kind of like the more experimental stuff that WITS did not see itself doing that now it's doing?
I think that like the shift has been pretty radical. I mean, even from a staff perspective, like we're using all sorts of different platforms that we never used before, shout out to Slack, but like things that we are like changing in our style of productivity and the way we're working together. I would say in terms of like the work that we're doing that's really different and innovative, like you said, Reyes, I think that the stuff on Instagram, the social media stuff, while we've always done, marketing through social media and things like that, I think having more of a focus on those conversations with the writers that we work with has been very different for us, because a lot of times we're very focused, most of the time we're very focused on the students, and the writers are going into the schools, working with those young people, but they're, and while they're the ones who are doing the huge bulk of the work of actually, working with young writers, we don't often see their faces a lot. And so I think it's really nice to talk to them, I think, and see them and sort of see the people that are behind the work. And so that has been really nice. And that's, I think, great about what's great about the Right Here sort of series that Bean has been doing. And I think another thing that has been really great to see is, we have a program that we piloted this past year that was called the Emerging Writers Fellowship. And so we had young folks who were artists between the ages of 18 and 24 come into a cohort and work with us kind of on pedagogy, on teaching creative writing, on creating those spaces for young people. And, they were sort of completing their year where they did a lot of professional development and then got to do some teaching opportunities. But then, COVID came, and so it sort of disrupted the path of that young leadership group. And what's been really nice is that we actually got to have all of or as many as we could that were available of the cohort for the Emerging Writer Fellows teach at summer camp this year. So they were partnered with another instructor, who had experience with the camp in the past. And I think for them, it was a really good experience to kind of delve into a whole new side of teaching. And, they did just such an amazing job. And I think one thing for us that's really important through all of our work, particularly the youth programs that we do, is trying to figure out what this pipeline looks like from, maybe you were a young kid who had WITS in your school, and then you competed in the Slam series when you were in middle school or high school. And then once you age out of that, what happens? Where there's a little bit of a gap between doing some of our youth programs and then being in a place where, you're able to be a professional WITS writer. And so we wanted to have an opportunity for young people who were coming out of some of our youth programs or coming out of that same space, who wanted to sort of match their artist creative writing work with education and create that kind of space. So it's been nice to sort of see them in practice. They did some of the WITS U sessions. They also worked with the summer camp. So that's been a really cool opportunity for us to really have that group of leaders come in and support the work we're doing. And then I think with the Quick Wits thing, we'd never really provided that kind of content. We have a blog and we'll post poems or lessons and things like that on the blog, but having something that's a little more formal resource for the folks who don't necessarily have WITS in their child's school, or for the young people who have never been able to attend any of our in-person workshops, but they love writing and they just want more work to engage with. I mean, that was kind of just a cool online opportunity. All of those were on YouTube. It was all of our writers who, pitched those ideas and the content for that. So I think that was definitely a new venue for us to sort of work within.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I think that is kind of like a cool thing to kind of, in regards to your young, leader professional development program, I imagine that was like, I imagine it was like a good shock to have of like, now here's a new landscape. How do we adjust? And I think that's a really great test for, for something like that. Shannon, same question. What has been kind of been the biggest, or rather like shift, or like the most experimental thing that HCP was like, we never imagined doing this, and now we got to go full steam into it?
Well, all of it feels pretty radical, as Patricia was saying. Like I said, we're learning a lot of new skills really quickly. There's a couple things I want to highlight. We entered into a partnership with Precision Camera. They're a brick and mortar retailer and photo lab based in Austin, Texas. And so that was kind of brought on by this closure. And so with them, we've been providing free classes, workshops, and it's a chance for us to kind of reach a new audience, but also get their support for our programming. So that was one way that I don't know if we would have tried something like that without this. We've also, we have a history of doing master classes, and we plan to continue. But this summer, I've been doing some visiting artists workshops. And so, for instance, in May, Elizabeth Childs, who is a really phenomenal photographer based in Austin, and she was able to give a 3-week course. We wouldn't have been able to bring her out for a 3-week course online. That was about our bodies in nature and photography in nature. So we're trying to experiment with bringing in new voices, and we don't have to stay within the Houston Metro for that. So that's a great opportunity. As I mentioned a little bit when I introduced myself, our magazine, our publication that's online, Spot, we already have a lot of scholarship about, relating to our exhibitions and about photography on Spot magazine. But as we've moved our programs online, it's been a place to kind of keep new videos and all these kind of new digital things we're trying out there. So Spot magazine, which was already something we were really proud of, has become an even more robust tool for the organization. I guess everything is new. So like I said, we had not tried doing video stuff. We definitely hadn't tried being online. So we are really learning a lot right now.
Yeah, on that note, kind of getting into so we've talked about kind of like those shifts, and obviously those teaching kind of priorities, and how do we shift those, kind of going more into like the actual like physical kind of the technology. How, and Patricia, if you can answer first, what are technologies, softwares, methods that y'all are kind of using to engage audiences now? Whether it be, because, for example, I mentioned Instagram, you've mentioned Zoom, but what are some other stuff, or what are some things that you're kind of fine-tuning the practice of to engage your audiences?
Sure. So, I think that for us, Zoom with kind of the live sessions, and then obviously social media, Instagram, Facebook, those kinds of things are things that we've kind of just upped a little bit. Zoom was new, to all of the workshop models. I think the biggest sort of software thing was us figuring out the use of the platform that we used for Creative Writing Camp. So we worked with our partners at Rice and used the Canvas platform. So figuring out how to kind of create module days that have both access to the live sessions and the sessions that were recorded, or the content. And that was a lot of heavy lifting on the part of our writers, who were figuring out how to configure that day, because it's really customizable. So that definitely was the sort of technology big overhaul for us. I think even things that seem as simple as navigating how to restructure like a staff meeting format, for digital, and how to navigate, just the daily work of communicating with our partners at schools and community locations, video call to email to chatting to texting, all this kind of thing was definitely like a big shift for us. I think something that I'm excited about is sort of exploring, new opportunities that we can use. And so we're currently working on some programming to start this summer, and hopefully maybe extend into the next year, that will allow us to do a little more like extended period of time work with young writers. And so, the longest program we have right now is 2-week sort of creative writing camp format, but we're looking at, can we do online creative writing workshops on more of like a monthly basis that have 4 sessions each where you get to build a little more community with that group of writers, and then what platforms look good for that? Is it things that we need to relearn or learn brand new? And so we're really kind of navigating what all those platforms look like. So for us, I think the most important part for the technology piece is the safety of the students, is the the learning curve for the writers who will be really working in and out of those systems. And then also, one thing that's, I think, been very important for me in just thinking about this technology is there's a lot of really exciting things out there. And also, we definitely are trying to remain aware that while it creates access for some people, it denies access for others. And so with the technology piece, it's definitely navigating the accessibility. And, at this time where there's thousands of students who might not have access to computers or stable Wi-Fi, what does that look like as we continue to build programs in a digital space or in a space that is, allowing for other ways to access the content, if that makes sense. So that's something that we're navigating for sure, and thinking through in terms of these platforms, the technologies that we're using, and what we can do moving forward.
Absolutely. Shannon, same question. What are some technologies, softwares, methods that are using to engage audiences?
So we are primarily using Zoom, which works well for our needs. One thing that really is great for us is the screen sharing. Photography works actually, for the most part. Not all of our classes work online, but photography works quite well online, and being able to share your images. And but as Patricia was saying, like there's all kinds of adjustments. Like we're sending email confirmations, and sometimes people don't get our emails somehow. And so more and more people are getting text messages from me being like, "Did you get our email? Do you know how to log into this class?" Or and calls from me. So there's a lot of those little things to navigate. And also, as Patricia was saying, just how do we work as a staff when we're all working remotely, and how do people get in touch with us? Have been new shifts. I agree. I appreciate Patricia's point also about accessibility. I'm primarily working with our learning center and our adult classes, we do pre-class surveys and we try to anticipate accessibility needs as much as possible. So, if we had a student who had a hand injury, and so he asked us to make sure we had recorded the classes because it's hard for him to take notes. So things like that. But there's still, I think we're still learning, whether it is making sure there is captions for the videos, or making sure you're reaching students who don't have access to the technology as well.
Yeah, I imagine again, and that's its own whole conversation, right? Of how do you change, in regards to the difference between photography and literary arts, and kind of there's even a mixing of those two kind of venues, or those two different crafts practices. I guess one question I have for still kind of on the technology side is, how do you, as an organization or as a staff, kind of work with those artists, those teaching artists, to kind of ensure that consistency, or to kind of have that baseline of you have access to a camera, good, microphone, so Patricia, can you kind of talk about kind of that adjustment for the staff of working with those artists to kind of provide that consistency of quality in the literal technological presentation?
Yeah, definitely. I think that for us, it was the options, so at the beginning when we had Quick Wits happening and Wits U, I think it allowed for maybe some folks who weren't either as comfortable doing at first the live sessions, and who might not have had easy access to be online for full hour in a space that was quiet. There are a lot of writers that we work with that have families, that have pets, that have lives. And so, sometimes teaching online is very difficult when you're also managing your entire life outside of that. And so, for the Quick Wits thing, the writers got to sort of record that on their own. They gave us the content of what they were going to do it about. And, we kind of supported them. We did some office hour opportunities where most of the staff or all of the staff would be just on call for like a certain period of time weekly, so that the writers could jump on and ask any questions about how to navigate, doing some of those recorded sessions or live sessions or creating content for their school placements. So I think like having those options was helpful and made it a little more accessible for our writers and artists to be able to continue, the work that they were doing. And then I think for the things like the Wits U sessions, myself and my colleague Ray Crawford, who were really working on those with the writers, we met with every single person before their session multiple times. We had it was like a lot of heavy communication just to make sure that they felt supported in this kind of new venture. And so, and it kind of ranged from talking through basically like what the whole hour could look like for the workshop, or just taking them through like, how do you screen share on Zoom, and do you want me to do it? How do you share your sound? That kind of stuff, to just make sure that we're supporting them in that way. And I think that collaborative thing, and that kind of the feedback that we were getting from the instructors to support the next instructors was really helpful, particularly when we had folks who are facilitating workshops from like our youth leadership cohort, because this was the first time they were ever doing it. So having that support and allowing them to also sit in on some of the sessions and just watch and observe, I think was really helpful, so people could kind of wrap their heads around how to, even get started. And so I think that with the technology piece, it's definitely just a lot of support and a lot of figuring it out. And I know that, on our own as a staff, like a lot of us individually had to practice a lot and do a lot with the online systems, especially the one for camp. Our program team really dug into how does that work? How can we support writers? And if we aren't the ones that are able to support, who can answer those sort of more tech, related questions? So I think that was really the way that we were looking at that. And so now as we continue to create more online programs, I think every time we have to think about, well, what is the learning curve? How are we supporting the writers? Capacity wise, does it make sense for us to use this platform versus this platform, just given like how much learning there needs to be and how much, support that folks need to create that space.
Absolutely. Now I imagine it's quite an adjustment. Shannon, same question. How is HCP working with its artists to kind of put on that consistency or quality, or of like making sure that the artists could put on such programs or classes?
Mm-hmm. So there, like I said, there was some training early on, but also I have done kind of one-on-one with some of our instructors as needed to help them get comfortable with the platform. I will say our instructors are such professionals that many of them have like a studio in their, access to a studio and their equipment. So they've really been low maintenance for me as far as needing help with equipment. There are some classes that are maybe large or have kind of more moving parts. And so in those cases, a staff member might join the class to help kind of moderate the comments and help answer questions, so the instructor can focus. But I mean, it's really all the credit goes to the instructors, because they're just very nimbly learning on the job and adjusting. And Patricia made me think about this. This is not quite an answer to your question, but a benefit I've seen is more of our instructors are taking classes from their peers, not necessarily to learn the technology, but just for more professional development as artists and as educators. And so I think because it gives them more flexibility than coming back to HCP for a class. And even our staff have been taking more classes. So I think that is helping their practice and as artists and educators as well.
I think it's actually a really cool point to bring up. I mean, a few things, like one, yeah, kind of like the baseline of like, of course, photographers would have their own cameras, really good ones.
Yeah.
But like, as opposed to, yeah, like writers, like would they have a kind of like that baseline of technology? And I think those are really cool kind of conversations of like to come from. And I think that's why it's great to have y'all both on here to kind of like speak to those. Another thing, yeah, that you brought up, I think that's really cool is, yeah, as a teacher myself, I've attended plenty of workshops and classes and kind of created my own kind of like pedagogical models based on those. But now that that's all gone, I haven't really had a lot of online learning. And so now I have to rewatch and learn all over again, like how to do that. And so I think that's a really cool thing that y'all are working on. And I think is going to be something to see how it plays out in the foreseeable future. So kind of in that context, Patricia, you can start off asking, what are any of these methods something that WITS will continue to use beyond this crisis?
I think so. I think that as we're building new programs, we're seeing a lot of what is sustainable and what is not. And I think what is cool about the shifts that we've had to make, while they've not necessarily been easy, I think it has forced us to sort of think through the programs that we're doing at every level. And so there's all these pieces that you have to think through when you're doing even just something as straightforward as like a regular live Zoom class. There's a lot of pieces that you have to think through, even more so than I think we were thinking about in our free sessions with students at Discovery Green or something like that. And so for me, I think we'll definitely use that thinking and that model as we move forward and see, well, what's sustainable online. I think we are thinking too about is offering online workshops or opportunities for young people in this kind of format something that should just be done all year round, regardless of in-person or not in-person, as an additional way to create accessible programs. And programs for those who don't necessarily have the opportunity to have our programs in schools. And so I think that it will definitely be sort of carried over into the stuff that we're doing, especially just that model of how we're thinking about providing those opportunities, supporting our writers and serving the young people that are, a part of that engagement. So it's definitely given us a lot of, I think, time to think about that and space to also think forward into how can we continue to put accessibility and equity and equality sort of at the forefront of the things that we are planning, and how being in this pandemic, being in the current model of working online really forces us, I think, to think about those pieces of the programs as we move forward. And that is something that, I really hope we can continue to work through, at the point at which we, do open up and have in-person programs. How can we still use that thinking to continue to push that forward?
Absolutely. Great points. Shannon, same thing. Are there methods or things that HCP is going to continue using beyond this crisis that they're laying out?
Yeah, we absolutely are going to continue doing virtual programs. I mean, we certainly miss having in-person programs. Speaking for the Learning Center, working our printing class or kind of tactile classes where you're handling a camera or lighting, we look forward to being able to bring those back in the future. But, I think we're seeing that there's an audience that maybe couldn't reach us before when it was purely in person. And we're able to, there's certain things that they do work better online. And even like our photo history classes are more popular online. And so I think we're excited to keep experimenting with that and to hopefully continue to expand our audience. And the same thing with our programming for our exhibitions. We're certainly keeping an eye to the COVID numbers and with how we plan for our reopening. But, I know our goal in the fall is to have an in-person exhibition open up, but we while the exhibition would be physically in the space and people could come and see it, we plan on doing our public program still online, which, you know, as I was saying with our public lectures, it opens up some fun things you can do with an opening where you can have many artists visit, you know, from all over the world that can participate in the opening. You can kind of, there's some new things we can try out, and some of it's, you know, a lot of it is necessity, but we're excited to try this out and to open ourselves up to the worldwide photo community. And this is something I forgot to share with the things with the shift over, but we did an open call. I think they're just about to announce, so I'm not sure exactly what day they're announcing, but we had a togethering opening call, and we had over 600 people submit from around the world with photography. And I mean, I saw work. I didn't jury it, but I saw some of the work, and there was work, you know, from Japan, from the Netherlands, from, I mean, every place there were artists contributing. And so it's exciting to connect with those artists from all over the world and put Houston on the map as a vital art center. And so we're proud to be able to do that. And I think we want to continue to have that footprint worldwide. So we look forward to opening our doors, but we will continue to be doing online programs. And as I was saying earlier with the Grace, this gave us a chance to learn where everybody was learning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, almost rounding out our time together. One quick just kind of question. And you can either answer this on a personal level or from an organizational standpoint, however you wish. But what's been your biggest takeaway from this experience? And again, obviously, please, Patricia, go ahead.
You know, I spoke to this a little bit in the last question, but I think my biggest takeaway is, again, that that piece of thinking forward in terms of accessibility, equity, and quality. And I think, you know, really planning for how we can, as an organization, adapt and be flexible, extend grace, but also really keep those ideas sort of in the forefront of the way that we create programs. You know, I think that this pandemic has sort of illustrated a lot of these underlying barriers that we're seeing on a regular basis for how students are accessing arts programs in schools and in the community. And I think, you know, it's just a complete shift, and it's a whole sort of new normal, as a lot of people are saying. But how can we make sure that we're adapting to that in a way that really honors the young people that we work with? You know, I know that there's a lot of young people in the community that, you know, aren't often getting their voices heard, given that, you know, we're in a global pandemic. There's a lot of other things going on related to that. And so how can we create that space for them, allow them to, you know, be the center and be the focus and move forward, really thinking of them as the forefront of our work.
Thank you. Shannon, same question, either on a personal or organizational standpoint. What's been the biggest takeaway from this experience?
Well, I think I have two takeaways. I started at HCP in February, so this was a challenging time to start at a new organization, but I just learned that my peers, the staff, our board, and our instructors are just, I mean, they're really an incredible group. I've learned so much from them over these months, and they are so adaptable and so willing to try new things, and they care about the work, which is really makes my job easier and is really gratifying. And then the other takeaway, and this is personal, but for Mother's Day, I had registered my mom for a class, and she's not an artist and she's not taken art classes before. And her feedback about the class was that, and she really felt motivated creatively and to make work, and was inspired by all the other artists in the class. But also she was able to dig deep and reflect on things that she was going through. You know, this is a really challenging time for us all. And it was very gratifying, not only as a daughter, but to know how important this work is. That, I know it's a challenging time for the arts, but that the arts can be healing, can help us grow, can help us learn more about ourselves. And so I'm so glad to be doing this work in this time, because it is vital and important. And I'm so glad to do it with my team. So.
Nice. Yeah, of course. Got to show love for the team. Yeah. All right. So last thing, shout outs, any digital presence y'all want to lead people towards. Go ahead, Shannon, since you already kind of like up here. Yeah, please.
Well, just, sign up for classes with HCP. You can, and I'll throw it in my email. Email me. I will personally walk you through what is the best fit for you for a class. But we have something for everyone, whether you're like my mom and you've never taken an art class, or you're a pro and you want to, work on new ideas. We're here for you. And like I said, arts are healing and nourishing in these times. So we want to see you.
Thank you. Same thing, Patricia. Any shout outs, any online digital presences you want people to direct people towards?
Yeah, definitely. I would encourage everyone to take a look at our website. We have some upcoming creative writing camp programming that's going to be happening in July for students in grades 6 through 12. Lots of different class options with some different topics, really amazing instructors. And so those will be happening towards the end of July, starting July 20th. So, we want folks to go in and register and let other young people know who want to take those courses to look out for those. And then on our website, we have a section that is for our virtual offerings. So keep an eye on that as we continue to create new programs and put out additional stuff that you can engage with. So just visit us and follow us on social media. We're at What's Houston on most platforms, so you can kind of see our Right Here program and some of the other stuff that we're putting out there right now.
Thank you. Yeah, just kind of a quick shout out to y'all's people. You got Catherine, Jonathan, Natalie, Jack saying a bunch of nice things. So thank y'all for those comments. Again, thank you two. I think really inspiring, amazing work that, again, I think are really great models and knowledge sharing to kind of, again, for other people to kind of work off of or to be inspired by. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your dedication to making sure that these things are accessible, but also working with teaching artists. Thank you all so much. I hope you stay safe, and I hope the organizations again flourish from these experiences.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
See y'all later. Yeah, so there you have it again. I mean, there were so many questions that firing off of my brain that I wish we could ask, but another time. It's certainly, as a teacher myself, there's so many questions I had in regards to, how does one adjust a pedagogical model to include photography or literary? And again, we can get more into the theoretical aspect of that, but again, another time. So again, thank you for tuning in. Some other stuff to direct y'all towards. So the Artist Resource Newsletter is next week. As is the Art on Tap, but the Artist Resource Newsletter, which is the first Thursday of every month, that will be going out next Thursday. So if you have not subscribed to our newsletters, please do so. And again, you'll get the latest deadlines on fellowships, grants, opportunities to enter, all that great stuff. So that's next Thursday. Another thing we want to mention is to join our squad. So continuing to offer these unique, free, and vitally important resources requires a network of support. So we kindly ask that you consider supporting our organization by becoming a friend of Fresh Arts if you have the means. Your support allows us to develop resources that respond to the unique needs of artists and artist-led organizations in our region and help strengthen the arts sector by supporting the people who made it all possible, the artists. Another thing we would appreciate you doing is that in the last 2 months, Fresh Arts series of live webinars and virtual conversations have reached over 30,000 views. To better inform us of the impact of this initiative, we humbly invite you to complete our brief impact survey. Your response will allow us to continue these efforts and inform the future of our programming. So please fill out the survey. That'll really help us out a lot. So next week, next Thursday, begins a new series as we enter July. And it's a series that the staff has kind of spoken about, and we're really waiting to see how this really plays out. But I think we're gonna have really great discussions, as you saw today, and then in June. So in June we focused on the COVID-19 crisis, but with everything that's happening in America, that's always been happening in America, we're going to start a new series called the Fresh Arts Conversation Series, Cultivating Equity in the Arts. So at Fresh Arts, two of our core values are community and openness. We believe that by cultivating a community, we can enhance the social capital of creatives and amplify a resonant collective voice that helps us all be seen and heard. We also believe that we should never stop learning, listening, and responding to the world around us. So representation in institutional leadership, featured artists, funding for projects and organizations, lack of accessibility, etc., have been long-standing issues in the arts community in Houston and beyond. We are committed to helping to build a healthy and equitable arts community. That is why Fresh Arts will be devoting our Facebook Live platform, which again has been focused on artists adapting and staying resilient during the COVID-19 crisis, to amplify and engage in conversation with artists and arts organizations rooted in advancing the voices of marginalized individuals and communities. So join us next Thursday and every Thursday in July at 4 p.m. For these conversations. So next week, we'll actually be having a discussion on art writing, art criticism, cultural criticism by writers of color, and addressing issues in regards to the visibility of such critics, of such important aspects of the arts community, discussing what avenues exist, what don't exist. As an art critic myself, we're going to have two really exciting guests who have completely different styles of writing regarding art. So we're going to have Brenda Edith Franco of Deep Red Press, and we're going to have Willow Curry, an amazing writer in the community who has done workshops. And so they're both really great writers. They're both really important and necessary pieces of a larger conversation of how do we focus, how do we support, how do we bring attention to artists of color. Well, one way is by having a robust writing, criticism, a critical lens of artists of color by writers of color. And so that's next Thursday. After that, we're going to have another exciting conversation regarding language justice in the arts. And we'll give more details on that soon, next week rather. And so again, please tune into those conversations. As always, as you saw today, always inspiring, always great stuff. Always happy to show you the different viewpoints and what everybody is working on, how everybody is adjusting and living in these times. So again, tune in next week. One final shout out is Art for All, Houston Furniture Bank Art Gallery virtual opening. Our very own Angela Carranza sat on the jury for that, so you know it's good. So please tune in to that. I believe that is today from 6 to 7 p.m., really in an hour. So check that out. Link should be in the comments. Again, there you go. Thank you, Angela. And so tune into that if you have time today. Really great stuff. So, all right, stay safe, stay well. I'll see you around later.